God expects us to care for His creation and faithfully steward everything He has entrusted to us. Steep slopes are not suitable for cultivation, but because of the land pressure from overpopulation and food insecurity, even marginal lands are used to grow crops. These lands are very sensitive to erosion and far from ideal to cultivate and must be managed as carefully as possible. The high runoff rates also results in poor moisture penetration and the loss of plant available nutrients. So it is vitally important both to the environment and to sustainable profitability to slow down the runoff. We have shown throughout the series the vital importance of God's blanket in preventing crusting, erosion, and runoff, and this is our most important way to achieve this. However, it is strongly recommended that slopes with a drop of 1 meter every 6 meters or 15%, and soils that are highly erodible, they should all be protected by contour barriers of some form. Large-scale earth-moving equipment is costly, impractical for the poor, and often ineffective in the long term. Living barriers are such an amazing natural way for farmers to achieve excellent results in preventing erosion, improving rainfall penetration, and reducing nutrient losses. Living barriers are strips of permanent plants that are grown closely together on the contour. Before we can plant a natural living barrier on steep slopes, we need to first establish the contour lines. The most practical tool to make a contour line is an A-frame. The materials needed to make an A-frame are 2 thin, straight, sturdy poles 2.5 meters long, 1 thin, straight, sturdy, shorter pole 1.5 meters long, 2 meters of string, a stone, and a few nails, a bucket full of pointed sticks, making the A-frame. First, nail the two 2.5 meter poles at the one end to make an upside down V shape. Then, nail the 1.5 meter pole onto the 2 meter uprights on either side to make the shape of an A, about 1.5 meters from the top of the A. Tie the 2 meter string onto a nail at the top of the A-frame and then tie the rock onto the other end of the string, making sure that it hangs below the crossbar. Calibrating the A-frame. Before the A-frame can be used, it needs to be calibrated. Place the A-frame on a slope with one leg higher than the other. Place a peg on the outside of each foot to mark these positions. Allow the string to hang freely from the top, and once it has come to rest, mark the position A on the crossbar with a pen. Then reverse the whole A-frame, placing the feet in alternate positions. Again, let the string come to rest and mark that position B on the crossbar with a pen. The midpoint between these two marks is the calibration or level mark C. Measure the distance between the two marks and divide this by 2 and then mark C on the crossbar. Whenever you pivot the one foot of the A-frame up or down the slope, the string will move one way or the other across the crossbar. When your string comes to rest at the calibration or level mark C, this is when the 2 feet are on level ground. Establishing the first contour. Start at the top of your field and walk backwards down the slope with your hand outstretched at eye level in front of you. Once your hand eye level is in line with the top of the field at about 1.75 meters, this is the point to start the first contour. If you have neighbors that farm upslope from you, then start by making your first contour at the very top of your field, as their runoff will already have gathered considerable momentum. Start at the one end of the field and place the first peg in the ground. Place the first foot of the A-frame in line with the peg and pivot it until the string comes to rest on the level marked C. Place another peg at the second foot. These two pegs are now on level ground and are the basis for the whole contour. Swivel the A-frame on the second foot until the string comes to rest at the level mark again, and place another peg at the new foot placement. Continue to swivel the A-frame from foot to foot, all the while marking off the contour as evenly as possible. Once the whole contour is laid out, then go back to the start of the field and adjust any pegs that make minor kinks to allow for a more manageable, smoothed contour line. Establishing the second contour. Steep slopes need more contour barriers than gentle slopes, but by using a rule of thumb of the eye extended hand level, farmers can easily and safely lay out their contours with minimal risk of soil erosion. Again, walk backwards down the slope with your hand extended in front of you until your eye is level with the last contour line you just completed. Start making your next contour at this point and continue as you did before by pivoting and marking the individual foot placements of the A-frame. After completing each contour line, keep on moving down the slope all the way to the end until your whole field is neatly laid out with contours at regular intervals. Living barriers. Once the pegs have been laid out and the contours have been smoothed, you are then able to lay out the living barriers. There are many living barrier plant species, however, we do not advocate the use of invasive alien species because of the environmental damage that they can cause. A very successful living barrier plant is vetiver grass, which is a perennial, upright and deep-rooted grass, tolerant of drought, waterlogging, high and low pH, heat and cold. Importantly, it is not invasive and doesn't produce viable seed, so it must be planted from side tillers. It grows up to about 2 meters tall and can be cut and used to add to mulch material on the upslope side. The roots are very deep and dense and make an impenetrable layer for soil to move through, making its erosion control exceptional. Vetiver living barriers are one of many plant types that are cheap, safe and effective at slowing erosion and retaining soil moisture. An alternative is to leave wide indigenous grass strips as living barriers. Growing your parent tillers. If you get a few individual tillers or plants, you will need to multiply them out as quickly as possible. Plant them in 15 centimeter deep planting stations at 30 centimeters between plants and in 75 centimeter rows, with a tablespoon of wood ash and 500 mils of manure per planting station. This will give the parent plants lots of space to bush out and plenty of food to multiply fast, but it is also quite alright to plant them in furrows as well. You should easily get 15 new tillers or plants in a year, so you can expand your numbers exponentially. In 2012, I took 2,000 vetiver plants to Kobo to a nursery, and in just 3 short years, we were able to multiply them up to 65,000 plants. Preparing tillers. When the vetiver plants have filled out, then dig out the entire plant using a fork or a pick, as the root mass is very dense. Shake out excess soil from the root zone and trim down the leaves to 15 centimeters long and the root mass to 10 centimeters long with a sharp bush knife. Next, strip the individual tillers apart from the root mass, taking care to get as many intact roots as possible for planting out. Stack the tillers in clutches so you know how many meters you can prepare in your fields when you transplant them out. Remember the management saying, you cannot manage what you do not measure. Planting out. Prepare 10 centimeter furrows like we do for most single row, closely spaced crops. Place a tablespoon of wood ash every 60 centimeters and 500 mils of fresh manure or compost every 60 centimeters and cover with a 3 centimeter soil separation layer. Vetiver will be in the ground for a long time, so feed it well like this from the beginning so that it will tiller well for many years. Place a tiller at every 30 centimeter interval down the furrow line. Then place each tiller at the correct depth, cover level with soil around each tiller and replace the blanket. Repeat this down the furrow line. Once you're finished, you should have a single vetiver tiller every 30 centimeters, surrounded by God's blanket in a nice straight row or contour band. The furrow planting will encourage the plant to establish a strong root mass right across the living barrier. This vetiver has been in the ground at Grass Roof in Port Elizabeth for just 1 year, and you can already see how well it has become established. We have cut it 3 times already and is providing much needed blanket for the 3 75 centimeter rows above it. Vetiver can grow really wide, so I suggest that you increase the space below your last planting line to accommodate this. We don't have to have vetiver in this garden because the slope's not really steep enough, but we use it to educate people on the importance of living barriers, with our vetiver also dividing our portions of fruit, leaf and root portions, as well as supplying us with plenty of blanket material. On steep slopes, the vetiver will quickly bush out to make an impenetrable soil erosion barrier, but as an added precaution, just leave 1 meter of undisturbed vegetation on the downslope side of the vetiver row until it has become fully established. During the years of the accumulation of God's blanket, these living barriers will serve to protect your soil from erosion. Any soil that moves downslope will be trapped and build up on the top slope side of the living barrier, and the tillers will push right through this fertile soil and stabilize it even further. Over the years, this will create a natural step or terrace effect and reduce the slope of your lands between the contour barriers. Be a good steward of the land that God has entrusted to you. Even if you are farming a steep slope, you are without excuse. Use living barriers planted across the slope on the contours to prevent soil erosion so that your farm can be passed from one generation to another.
Let your glory fill this land, faith. Oh, you know that the blessings are coming, Jesus. You are the way out. You are the way out. Jesus. You